everybody, welcome to StashBlaster Quilts. My name is Maria Spitalnik and I'm here to help you make more quilts in less time with less stress. So, I am hoping that the camera that I currently have aimed at me is going to stay alive. It has been out most of the week, but for some reason it likes you guys. So I said, what the heck, I would test it. Forgot my lights, sorry. And see if it would work, and lo and behold, it did. So I'm going to keep it on when I can, but we may have to switch over to a different camera. So I am all prepared for that. The thing is, you never know with this stuff. I've already ordered replacements, so hopefully it won't be a huge problem for long, but yeah, not a lot of fun. So anyway, I do have a backup, so if this freezes up and I can't tell, please just drop something in the chat and I will pay attention and switch over to the other camera. Okay, so, hi. If this is your first time here, tech problems and I are not totally unfamiliar with each other, but I've gotten better over the years since I started this, and I can usually figure out most things, but it hasn't been really great this time. So, let me update you on what I've been doing over the last 2 weeks since we last met. And by the way, if some of this is starting to get tedious, just let me know and I can always stop. But some of you keep saying that, no, you really like to see just whatever it is that I've done, whether it's processing fabric or sewing. So there you go. Okay, I am going to switch to camera 3, which is this one. So you can see I did some more flowers this week, the last 2 weeks. My goal is to do either an arc, which is this piece here, and sew it together, or attach it to the flower, one per day. And I have managed to do more than that, so that makes me happy. I'm going to switch back to the other camera. So that's made some progress. I also have been processing a lot of fabric. And so, in the last 2 weeks, I have cut down my scraps to this stack of strips and blocks on the top. And so, I start, after I wash and dry the fabric, I wash it on hot, I dry it on high, then I will iron it, and if it is more than a yard, it goes on the wall behind me. And then, as long as it's more than 1/4 of a yard, either a true quarter or a fat quarter, it gets folded an extra time and put on the wall behind me. And I can show you guys that stuff again anytime you want. But anything that's smaller than that 1/4 of a yard or fat quarter gets processed into strips and blocks. So that's what this pile I just showed you is. This is just all taking every other bit of that fabric that I've got and whittling it down into these smaller sizes. So it can go into the drawers that are across from me, or behind where you're sitting right now. And I've got tons of drawers of that, and you will be seeing that during the studio tour I'll do later in the year. And you'll get to see just how much there is. There is a ton over there. But first you process, then you put away, then you got to figure out what to do with it. So, because some of these drawers are already pretty full, and I still have a bunch of stuff to process downstairs, so it'll be interesting to see what we do. So it should be fun. But I did start on washing the red. So when I washed the first load of red, this was the color of the color catcher that was left. There were 2 of these in there. So I washed it again and I got this color. Still way too bright. I had to wash it a 3rd time before I got a true pink. So that was a little bit distressing because some of the dye had already redeposited, and even with multiple washings hadn't come out right away. So a lot of the red and whites that I washed are now red and pink. So that was a bit distressing, but it is what it is. You know, there's lots of different suggestions out there for how to scrub it all out. But honestly, at this point, I'm fine with red and pink. It'll go fine in a quilt. So that's how it's going to be. But it was a little bit distressing after I washed and then I washed and then I washed, and it was still like, eh. So, but anyway, so color catchers, if you do not use them, and you have new fabric that you're washing, then either wash it by hand and make sure that you wash it until the water runs clear, or you're kind of taking a chance and it might bleed and make your whole quilt a different color than you intended. And that has happened to me before. It is one reason why, even though people give me fabric, I always wash it before it goes onto the wall. Because what I don't want is either to have shrinkage I wasn't expecting, or a bleed. So particularly red and green bleed a lot, but they all do to some extent, and if you're not paying attention, you are going to be very unhappy later, especially if it bleeds after you've made the whole quilt. There are some fabrics that I think never stop bleeding, and so when that is the case, that gets put into quilts that I don't care if it bleeds. That's a picnic quilt. That's a trunk of the car, got caught in a blizzard type quilt. It's a dog quilt. It's not going to be one that I am going to be worrying about proudly showing people, because I don't want to have that happen. I will also say that when I do have a fabric like that that bleeds right away, that keeps bleeding, I will use that fabric right away. It's going to go either right into a pile marked bleeders for dog quilts, which sounds really horrible, but I tend to leave myself those kinds of notes. Or I'll just go ahead and make the quilt, even if I have other quilts in line, unless they're commission quilts, just to make sure that it doesn't get put into a commission quilt, because that would be the worst. So, color catchers. There's also a product called Retain. There's another one, Synthroid? No. I'm blanking on the name. But the idea for both of those is that it takes the color and it locks it into the fabric before it has a chance to bleed. If I'm doing if I'm washing little tiny scraps, or somebody has put, let's say, half square triangles on the free table, I will wash those by hand, still in really hot water, but I will add the Retain to it to give it less of a bleed to start with, and then I'll go from there. But everything else is the same. You cannot put either of those products, Synthropol, thank you. You can't put either of those products in a high efficiency washing machine. It has to be the old-fashioned kind. Because the reason that those washers are high efficiency is because they've got tons of little tiny tubes that shoot the water where it needs to go, and the Retainer Synthropol will block those tubes, and you'll have to buy a new washing machine. And nobody really wants to do that. We want to spend our money on fabric and toys and tools and that kind of stuff. So, Retain, color catchers. Okay, so that's the fabric that I processed. Okay, so last time I showed you the new quilt. So this is the camera that I had set up in case number 1 didn't work. So I have to move it, so hopefully you can see this now. Yep, okay. It's being a little difficult, but okay. So this is the new quilt. I had a friend ask me when I was coloring it, she said, "That's a pretty small quilt. How big are you going to make it?" And I said, "What you don't understand is this is 1/4 size." And so she held out her hands, and so she said, "Oh, it's going to be this big?" And I'm like, no. It's going to be 4 of these across and 4 of them up and down. So based on my chart, which is this is the chart, it's going to get posted fairly soon. This has all the measurements on there. And if you made it all the way out to the blue row, and you kept it square, each side is 134 inches long. Now, keep in mind that a California King is only 120. So why did I give you such a much bigger quilt than any of you are really going to make? It's because if you don't want to have this quilt where it's squared in the center and it's symmetrical around, if you want, let's say, a throw, then what you can do, I'm grabbing some extra papers here and a couple of pins, so forgive me for this. Let me throw a couple pins here. Oh, I've got a couple on top. You could say, okay, I want to do this. I'm only going to make it this wide. And this tall. Now, obviously, this is the paper that I use to make the paper pattern, so it's a little off, but that's okay. Let me pull an extra. Right. That ought to do. So you could say, I just want to make the quilt this wide, and maybe chop it off here. And you can, because you'll be able to determine just how much of the quilt you want to have. Now, just to give you an idea, there's 8 rings here. Each one, the ring itself gets bigger, and the triangles that make the shape get bigger. So, let me get a couple more pins here. Trying not to poke myself too badly. Okay, so this is 1, 2, 3, 4. This is only half of the rings. So on this chart, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. This green one is the equivalent to this outside one here. Okay, and you'll note the green one I cut off at an angle. So you certainly could find you don't need all of this. This angle might be cut here, and so you won't need as much fabric or whatever, but it will give you a place to start, and you will have all of the measurements to add that bottom strip on if that's what you choose to do. I know a lot of you like square quilts where it's more like this, where it's all centered and it's not asymmetrical. Asymmetry is one of the hallmarks of a modern quilt, which is what was the choice, which is why the paper version, you can see you could skew it so that it's very asymmetrical as much as you want. So there will be a copy of this picture on the website as well, and so what you can do is play around with exactly where you want to cut yours and only put in the pieces that you're going to want and need. This does mean that this quilt pattern is not a true pattern, because you can do whatever you want with it. So I understand that, and it can get a little confusing. That's why we're going to take a whole year to do it. And if you decide this isn't a quilt for you, you don't need to make it. But I also want to remind you that you don't have to just do the rings like this. You can do things like this. So instead of a ring, you could do chip blocks, both for the background and for the ring. You could also do blocks like these half square triangles. Now, I did get an email from one of you who said, what if instead of doing, I had mentioned on this that you could put 1-inch blocks here. It would be 4 on the long side. So you need 8 of them total. You could just put in 1.5 inch, so finish at 1-inch blocks and just have squares. And somebody wrote to me and said, well, what if instead of the squares, I wanted to put pieced blocks? You certainly can do that. You certainly can. You'll be my hero. But I'd like you to understand that those first internal blocks finish at 1 inch. The largest blocks we have here are 4.5. And of the 4.5, sorry, 5, ends at 5, you would need 125-inch blocks just for that blue outer ring. Okay? So you'll be making a lot of blocks. You don't have to pick all one color. There's no reason why you couldn't do chip blocks or the squares or whatever in all of the colors. That would also be a really nice quilt. But I do want to point out that if you go the block route, you're going to be doing an awful lot of little teeny tiny blocks, because the center here finishes at 1, then 1.5, then 2, then 2.5, finished size. So if you want to do, let's say, flying geese in that purple ring, you'd have to make 16 flying geese in order to get all the way around, unless you did something different in the corners, and so you'd have to figure out how you wanted to handle the corners. But yeah, that's a lot of teeny tiny piecing, which, if that's what you love to do, go for it. You men and women know that I love little tiny pieces. I keep them, I use them. But not everybody realizes when they make this grand aspiration just how many blocks that's going to be. So just as an example, the center square is only 1 block. It's a 2x2. Okay. Finished. Sorry. But you need 8 for the first colored ring. You need 20 for the second colored ring, then 32, then 48, then 68, then 88, then 104, and 120. So that is an awful lot of blocks. You're basically looking at 125, 2, 3, 4. You're looking at between 300, well, about 350 blocks. Granted, you have all year to do them. Nothing wrong with that, but it's going to be a lot of blocks, and I would hate for you to get partway through and decide that you didn't want to do it. Now, if you're doing the smaller, cut-down version, then sure, there's nothing wrong with that. One thing I would recommend, though, if you're going to be cutting the quilt into smaller pieces, that the focal point here should be 1/3 from the top or bottom, and 1/3 from the left and right, as best as you can do. That is the way most photographs are done. It is the way that most people read art when they look at it, and it will appear in the brain as being correct. If it's skewed off way at the top, then, or bottom, it's going to look wrong. Even though it shouldn't, it does. So just kind of keep that in mind in your designing phase. Oh, I had another thought and it's gone. It's gone. Okay, so just so you know, I am going to put the next ring on here. Oh, I remember what it was. I'm going to put the next ring of triangles on. I'm giving you rectangle sizes, and then you cut them. You make 2 rectangles the size I gave you, and then you cut on the diagonal, because it's not a true, it's not the kind of rectangle that you would be piecing into a block normally, because it's going to be much longer than it is wide. So I'm going to do that again because there is a partial seam, just so that everybody can see that again. But once those triangles are on, you need to square this up. And as it gets bigger and bigger, how do you do that? So there's a piece of just masking tape right here. Painter's tape works, masking tape works. I just slapped it in the middle, and then I drew a diagonal from here to here, just on the tape. So I've got a little plus sign here. One went this way, one went this way. I used that point. I took the measurement that I needed, divided it in half, and I used that to help me get the right length away and to square up. Because you're going to be trimming these down. The first block starts at 6.5. If you do the 7th background in advance of that last ring, each side is 131 inches. Okay? So that's really hard to do without a reference point. It's still a lot. It's over 60 inches. But by having the center of the quilt delineated, then you can stack your rulers in and get that first cut true, and then you'll slide an interior ruler up, then slide it up. You can use it to cut again, slide and slide, and that will help keep the whole thing aligned the whole way. But it is difficult. to do by yourself, especially if you don't use a central reference, to try to figure out exactly where that's going to be in order to get square. So pick your center point, go from there. It'll be much easier to do all your truing. Okay? I think that's it. So, oh, our tip. Again, if this is your first time here, I always start with some sort of tip of the day, and it's usually organizing related because that's my full-time gig. So I'd like to start with the bathroom for this one. A lot of people think about organizing the bathroom almost last on their list because they want to do the public areas that other people see, then the bathroom, then maybe an office, something else that bothers them. But the bathroom is usually fairly easy to organize, and it's fairly quick to do, which is nice. Even if there's drawers, they're not usually that jam-packed. But what I'd like to talk to you about doing is dealing with all those partial bottles of shampoos, conditioners, hot oil treatments, body scrubs, all of that stuff. I was in a house this week with one person living there that must have had 40 different partial bottles of things. And in going through them, she said, yeah, I tried that shampoo, but I didn't like it. Okay. And in my head, I'm like, then it doesn't belong in your shower. Because if you don't like it, you're not going to use it. And one of her thoughts was that maybe a guest would like to use it. Okay, maybe. Maybe not, but maybe. All right. So one thing that I recommend when you have guests is that you have a little basket in the room with an extra toothbrush, a travel toothpaste, some sanitary products, right? Just some little things like some aromatherapy sprays or things like that that they might enjoy. But you can also do things like put some shampoos and conditioners in there. If you're sharing the bathroom with them, then that's nice for them to be able to pick and see if they like. If you have your own guest bath, then you can put those products in the bathroom for them, either on the counter or, if there's not too many of them, in the shower. I had one client who put suction cup shelves on the back of her shower in the guest bathroom, and she labeled the front shampoos, and every bottle of shampoo she had that she didn't like went there. And then she had a conditioner, and then body wash, and then whatever, and then miscellaneous stuff. I forget what the other things were. And so, as the shelves got used up, she would take away a shelf and combine, so it would be shampoos and conditioners. Okay? And that way, products that she was not willing to use herself were available to guests who might love them. You never know. And so they would get used up. So that's handy. She would also, when she traveled, she'd bring home the travel size bottles of shampoo and conditioner and stuff, and she'd put those in there too. That's an option. If you won't use it, it's a way to use it up. Let your guests use it up. You can also give it to friends. You can say, you know what, I tried this shampoo. I wasn't a big fan of it for my hair, but would you like to give it a try? Because that way they don't spend the money trying it and decide if they like it or not. So maybe a friend can naturally declutter it for you. I know a lot of you, because I've gotten emails, I know a lot of you don't like to waste. You don't like to waste fabric, you don't like to waste thread, you don't like to waste anything. And given how expensive stuff is, both for our crafting and just general lives, not being wasteful is a wonderful character trait to have. I'm there 100%. But you don't have to be miserable either. Now, if you say, if it's not good enough for me, it's not good enough for my guests, that's fine. Then you either have to make the decision to throw it out or suck it up and use it up. Okay? And then when it's gone, you know not to buy it anymore. Okay? So you can do it either way. If you're deciding to get rid of it, things like shampoos you can just throw in the trash. But something that you should probably do is look on your local county's waste management site and see if they do household hazardous waste pickup and what is hazardous waste. So, for example, I just got a new nail polish remover that's coconut scented because the regular nail polish remover scent makes me nauseous if I'm trying to soak off either a dip or a gel polish. Right now I'm just natural because my son's getting married soon, so I'm growing them out. But if I'm trying to soak something off, sitting there for half an hour with that horrible smell just drives me insane. So I went ahead and I just used it all up. But if I had decided to get rid of it, it is actually hazardous waste. It's flammable. So that would have to go to the transfer station at the dump. So if you're unsure, look it up on the website and they will tell you either how to dispose of it or tell you to bring it in and have it dealt with at the dump. Okay? How long is shampoo good? It all depends. A lot of it depends on the brand. They're making more and more shelf-stable shampoos, but that means more and more chemicals too. There's even bar shampoo and conditioner out there now. So you would lather it like a bar of soap and then shampoo your hair with it because it's shampoo. That would last longer than the liquids just because it wouldn't be separating or anything. But generally, I would say the scent is going to start to change in no more than 2 years. Are you going to have a decent scent on that? It's the same thing like with perfume. You can smell a perfume in a bottle that's 20 years old and it smells fine, but when you actually put it on your skin, if you leave it there and then you smell it in an hour and a couple of hours and a few hours later, it can actually have denatured to the point that it's rancid and smells horrible. Which is why you never put on a perfume just for the first time just before you're going to go somewhere. Always test out your new your perfumes, especially the older ones, but an unknown perfume. Test it and then smell it on and off all day. Make a conscious effort because you don't want to be thinking that you're great and then you've acclimated to the scent and then you're kind of turning people off because you're just smelling rotten. Okay? So that's how it works with perfumes. So when it comes to anything with a scent, you can have that problem. So same thing with shampoo and conditioner. Shampoos will also, over time, not do as good a job handling the oils in your hair, but they'll still do something. If you think about it, back in the day, there was a bar of soap in the shower. That was what you used for your hair and your face and your feet. It still works. You can still do that. But it tends to strip more of the oils out of the hair, which is one reason why they only bathed once a week, and the oils were sufficient to keep their scalp and everything healthy. So even if it doesn't do as great a job, it'll probably still be fine. But if it's more than a couple years old, I'd worry about the scent. So I hope that answers your question, Judy. Okay. So let's add these triangles on, shall we? I did put this up with a couple of pins just so that it wouldn't fall as I was moving around. Now, if you wanted to, you could square up once you put the ring on, but since you have to square up after the triangles, I think that that's sufficient. I don't think you need to square up after the rings. Okay. Alright, I'm going to switch cameras here and move this one around. I'm glad that this thing is still working. I honestly didn't think it was going to. I did several Zoom calls this week and it didn't work at all. It was just black. So, alright. So we got lucky for quilting tonight. Alright. Now, I've moved it. Now let's hope. Hey, look at that. That's pretty good. Okay. So, here's our piece. Okay. These are just leaders and enders, since I had a few minutes. You probably heard me while I was sewing. Alright. Just going to put my mouse there to help hold it in place. Okay, now in this particular case, because the piece I needed was 48 inches, or 49 inches, and I didn't want to cut it length of fabric, I cut it width, but it did mean that I had to piece in a strip at the end here. So you can see that. That's one reason why I'm considering if I want to do this with I'm blanking. If I'm going to do this with the chip blocks, because those seams won't be noticeable. Now, I can tell you right now that I made a mistake when I cut this. Here's my square edge, which is fine. It is now facing face up. It means that it's going to be going the opposite direction as the triangle as this one, because I didn't pay any attention to which diagonal I took. If it matters to you, make sure that you're always taking the same diagonal with your fabric right side up. In this case, it was upper left to lower right. In this one, it's upper right to lower left. So, personally, I'm fine with that. I don't have a problem. So, I am going to... Yeah. So, I'm fine with it going the other way. It doesn't really matter. As long as both rectangles were cut the same, this will be fine. Okay. So... Okay, so this is the back side, this is the front side. So this is how it's going to go on the block. So now I'm just going to pull this down. So I'm putting the right sides together. And let me straighten her out here. Now, if you get nervous sewing long distance, and I don't mean, you know, you're visiting your cousin in Maine, you can square this up, stick a pin, in it like this, and then every few inches put another pin. I'm going to just eyeball this, okay? So I'm going to get it kind of close down here, shake it out. And then as it's going through the machine, I'm going to just make sure that my edges are lining up. And then also a little bit, make sure the edges are all lining up. So a little bit, line them up. Okay? So let's do this. Now, on the first piece, the first one is a partial seam. So I'm not going to go to the end, because the end... If you look here, okay, the point goes onto the vertical here where the first piece got sewn. So if I sewed this down all the way, this end would be floppy and more difficult than it needs to be. So I'm going to stop about halfway, which is more than enough. I could stop maybe 4 inches from the end, from where it would switch to the block, but I don't want to worry about that right now. So I'm just going to go ahead and take a couple of stitches here, yank this pin out, and then I'm going to sew. I hope that all made sense. Oh, another thing to think about is if you keep makeup or medication in the bathroom, that's a poor choice. The moisture from the shower will make the bacteria in your makeup breed a lot faster. and so it will make it go bad quicker. Same thing with your medications. Your medications will go bad quicker than they will if you stored them in another part of the house. I usually recommend the kitchen if possible, so that you can take your medication with whatever it is you're having in the morning, coffee, juice, whatever, water, and then from there it'll be much safer of a product for longer. So makeup, I recommend, if you can, don't store it in the bathroom. Even if you put it in a caddy under the bed and you just yank it out when you need it. However, mascara and eyeliner is only good for 3 months after the first time it touches your eye. Particularly with mascara, but with both of them. You have the container, you have the wand, and the wand keeps going from the container to your eyeball, and then to the container, and then to your eyeball. So any bacteria on your lashes goes into the tube itself, right? And it mixes with the other mascara or eyeliner that's in there, and then you pull it out and you stick it on your eye, and then you put it back in, and it then contaminates it more and more. And when you're not using it, it'll breed in there. So 3 months for anything that's going to touch your eye like that, that gets put back in like that. Technically, powder, eyeshadow and all of that should also be replaced after 3 months, but the bacteria load isn't nearly as bad as it is on the mascara and the eyeliner. And so most people are okay with that. If you get conjunctivitis or pink eye, immediately throw out all of your eye makeup. All of it. Powders, everything. Because you will reinfect yourself again and again, and you won't be able to get rid of the pink eye, and then you will wind up with a resistant strain. So just another thought in terms of how long is something good bathroom related. Okay, now I could put a leader ender in here. That would be a perfect time to do it. I'm not going to worry about that right now. I am going to cut all these other ones off that I sewed while I was waiting. And I'm just going to chuck them underneath my ironing table. I'll deal with them another time. Okay, speaking of the ironing table, I need to clear it. This is a very small working space, if for those of you who don't know. The room itself is not bad, but by the time you add in lights and cameras and tripods and everything else, it doesn't leave you a lot of room to maneuver. So I need to move some of this stuff, like my leaders and enders, back to underneath my sewing machine where they live when I'm not doing them. And let me tuck that under here. Okay, and my chart and my other box. Because I'm going to go ahead and press what we just did. Okay. And I forgot to grab a pen. Let me show you here. Let me turn it first. Okay, so I am folding this back out of the way, and I am just going to plan that after I press this, I'm going to fold it back like this and pin it so that it's clear of this edge and I don't accidentally snag something in the wrong way and cause myself a problem later. So I'm going to press what I sewed, and I did do about 2/3 of the way instead of half, mostly because I was chatting with you, and when we chat, we tend to be a little less observant. So first we warm that seam up. Alright, just making sure it was warm. And we fold this back and do a quick little finger press. Okay, I did have somebody tell me I'm not doing a finger press, I'm doing a nail press. That's true. Same idea. So you can do it however you're comfortable. I like to use my nail. Okay, so again, a quick press. We're not ironing, okay, we're pressing. And I tend to hit it again real quick on the way back. And then I'll get this next little bit here. So here's where I stop sewing, okay? So I'm only going to press that far. All right. And now, if I was downstairs on my big ironing board, I would be leaving this until it cooled. That is a dressmaker tip. I'm going to just steal a pin from one of my flowers here. There's also things like using a clapper, which also helps seams be nice and flat and stay that way. I'm obviously not doing anything like that here, just because of time. It also helps when you're doing multiples of something. So let's say I just wanted to sew, let's say I wanted to sew some half square triangles, and I wanted to sew a bunch of them, like the ones that I did. They're half square triangles being turned into 4 patches that I sewed earlier. If I wanted to take those and do a whole bunch of them, I would press them in order, and then by the time I was done at the end, the first ones would be cool, so I could start picking them up until I got to the ones that were a little bit warm. During that time, I'm pressing other things and putting them back at the top of the line, and then as they cool, you know, I kind of keep going left to right, top to bottom is how I tend to do it. And so the fact that it's sitting there doesn't hurt anything, and it gives me a much cleaner press. So if you have the, time, energy, and inclination, that is one way to be a little bit more successful in your pressing. Okay, so my first triangle is 2/3 of the way on, right? So now I'm going to put the next one on with the upright here, where it's going to be nice and square, and it's going to continue onto this piece, all right? And it'll just be a straight seam all the way. It gets super duper easy at this point. I always double check my right sides, especially in a case like this where it's white on white. It's not just a simple one color. It's all white. How can it not be one color? In this particular case, since it's white on white, it's painted, so it's a different texture and everything, and there is a definite right side. So that's important to make sure that I'm getting the right side where it needs to be. Okay, so now I'm just aligning the first few inches. I suppose I should roll the camera around. Let me just get these two lined up here. Alright, let's hope nobody gets seasick. Oh, that's right, I'm not on that camera, so that's good. There we go. Oh, now we're a little closer. That's good. That's the problem with having cameras that you're moving everywhere, is that you can't quite be sure how it's lined up. Now, because I don't have a leader and ender end, I'm just going to go ahead and put that down. I'm going to set my foot. I'm going to hold the threads with my finger until I get in a few stitches here, and now it's good. This was actually how I learned to sew. I didn't know about leaders and enders until I had been quilting for a little while. And I thought to myself that that was brilliant because I could sew 2 quilts at the same time. And the most tedious part is the initial piecing, because it's usually about half of the piecing you're going to do on the quilt. And it's the smallest pieces. So if you can knock them out when you're doing the more fun part of another quilt, then a lot of that tedium is gone. And that's always nice. Okay. Now in this case I did press the seam open. Usually we press to one side or the other. but because of how I wanted this to look, I pressed it open. But it's up to you what you want to do. If I was doing this as a chip block, it would automatically be to one side or the other as I was sewing the chips together. Which is one reason why I think I may do my version of this with the chips. And that will make things a little more interesting. But in the same situation, I'm going to be doing the rectangles and then cut on the diagonal, just like I'm doing with these full pieces here. One advantage, though, as well, is I'm going to start with bigger chips for these outer bands. So once I have this done, you'll have bigger chips in both color and in the background, because I do want it to look like you are getting, like it's a hallway, and as you go down, the things in the back are further away, so they're going to look smaller. So the stuff closer to me should be larger. So that's what I'm going to do. And then as I trim down, in order to make those chip blocks in the bigger pieces, I'm going to have smaller pieces, potentially even already sewn, that are going to be perfect for the smaller chip blocks. So I'm actually going to make my pieces in reverse order. And that's going to make it a little harder to follow for you. But if it's a way you would like to try, you'll be able to see how it works. And it is a little bit different, so. It's also a lot less wasteful of the fabric, and I hate to waste. We already talked about that. Okay, so here, I am double checking. Because I pressed away from the strip, my seam allowance is folded under the white. That's perfectly fine. If you pressed it the other way, then the corner intersections are going to be extra thick, which is why I don't. So you are going to see the fabric through here, and I always feel as I approach it to make sure that in the manipulating around, it hasn't gone halfway or have gone the other way and created a situation where my seam isn't going to lay properly, and it'll have a twist part way down. Okay, so I was just feeling that to make sure that that was right. I'm going to go ahead and put my piece back on. And again, we're going to go right on to the triangle we already sewed. I'm not leaving nice long tails because again I'm going to hold them with my fingers. Move it over to the other side. Move those. And now I'm going to press again. But I don't know that you need to watch that. So I am going to try to get this all done before we're done for the day. So you can watch how I end and finish that seam off. Right now I'm just warming up the seams. Seam. There's only the one. I'm always doing so many blocks at the same time. I always think in terms of plurals, but in this case it's just a one block quilt top. Which amusingly, now that I think about it, was one of the other options that I offered that some of you picked. So I guess that's another way that I design this to go along with the survey. If it's your first time here, at the end of every year I do a survey for what kind of annual quilt those of you who watch the stream want to see, because we haven't done the same thing 2 years in a row. The first one was a quilt that I designed using only 4 patches of various sizes. The second year was the mystery quilt, which was more of a mystery block than a whole mystery quilt, which some of you said you liked and some of you said you didn't. That you would have preferred an entire quilt with a bunch of different type blocks in it to do the to create just a final, more traditional mystery quilt. But so we did the mystery quilt, and then last year we did the stars quilt, and then this year we're doing this one. So it's been a wide variety. You guys keep picking different stuff. So if you are watching this at a later date and you're interested in these quilts, the annual quilts are on my website, StashBlasterQuilts.com. You can see it right here, StashBlasterQuilts.com. And there's an annual tab. You can go there and you can see the quilts. The first one is not on there. I didn't do that the same way. The mystery quilt is there, the star quilt, and then of course this one. It is my plan to post that chart I showed you real quick with the various fabric sizes sometime in the next couple of days, so that you can go ahead and get started. And it'll also include that picture that I mentioned. So I recommend that you print the picture and then I did not square that up. I mean, I didn't line it up right. That you print the picture and then fold it or cut it to get whatever size it is that you want. Okay. If you want or need any help with this, with figuring it out, please let me know. I'd be happy to help you with it. You can shoot me an email at stashblasterquilts.com, or you can leave a question in the comments. But for the most part, I'm happy to help with that. Again, this is kind of a weird quilt in that I'm not giving you just one size and one exact thing. But that's the cool thing about modern too, is that you can make it your own, and I wanted to give you that opportunity to do so. Sorry, I was just aligning there. So I've done a bunch of sewing so far this month, but it's all been in little dribs and drabs. So I have not done an extra live stream on that. That is something that I am planning on doing this month. I apologize that it hasn't happened yet. There has been wedding drama. Well, not wedding drama. Wedding dress drama. 2 weeks ago, we went to a whole bunch of stores, picked some dresses that I bought, knowing I can return them. But the first couple were purple, which is cool, but they're very plain. They're more going to church dresses than they are mother of the groom dresses. We did find a red one with some gold threads in it, which was very nice. But the top blouses, and when it's at my natural waist, which is fairly high, and I think that it just screams belly rolls, so I'm not super happy with that either. So I ordered some dresses from ThreadUp, and I will be trying them on and seeing if I like them better. And if not, then I will be spending yet another weekend shopping for dresses. Because there aren't that many places that sell that kind of a dress in my size, even though I'm in a major metropolitan area. So it's kind of distressing. I'm also debating on how blingy do you get, because I certainly don't want to be in any competition for glitz with the bride, you know. All of the advice I've gotten from the shop clerks has been funny, though. They're like, as long as you're not wearing white, you're not eclipsing the bride. Like, well, I don't think I would eclipse her. I just don't want there to be any sort of she's going too far, she's trying to grab attention, or, you know, not that I am. I'm just saying I would hate for there to be any feelings from her side of the family or anything. So I keep debating. But I've got to have something that I feel maybe not amazing in, but at least good. I want something I feel good in. And that hasn't happened yet. So we'll have to see what happens. But, alright, it's gonna be close. I still have the fourth side to put on, and we've got 5 minutes. It's possible. I put this side on in under 5 minutes. But I have to put on the fourth side and then finish the seam. So I do try to end on time. It may run a couple of minutes over. So if it does, I apologize. You're still welcome to hang out with me. But I am going to try to finish it on time. Alright, so I'm pressing side 3. I was talking with another online YouTuber about quilting. She also does quilting demos, and she says it's really funny because people watch us to learn stuff and to see how we do it, etc., etc. But a lot of times, because we're trying to do it at speed, even if it's edited content, you're trying to do it quickly because editing takes so blinking long. It's on average 7 hours per minute in order to do the editing. So, I mean, it's a long process. And so people are sewing very quickly. And so they say, you know, then I get pictures from my students and it's so much better constructed than the stuff that we do. Well, this is kind of an example. I'm not giving this the world's best press because I want to get it done to be able to show it to you. So it is kind of funny how that all works. Alright. So I'll tell you what I'm going to do is I'm going to start side 4. I'm not even going to finish it. I'm just going to get it started enough that I can press it back. And then I'll finish the first side just so you can see how that's done. And then I'll come back and finish the actual seam afterwards. I know it's weird, but that way you get to see it. Okay, so let me just quick do this. I just want to get a few more inches. Okay, so I'm going to take a couple of back stitches just like I did on the first one, just to have it be nice and clean, and I'll finish that later. Okay, so quick press, and then I'm going to spend 2 minutes and I'm going to finish this on that one side. And we're going to pretend I finished the seam. Alright, if you've had a good time today watching me scramble, and you haven't already subscribed, please feel free to subscribe, like, do all of that stuff, comment. All of those activities help whatever YouTuber you're watching, because it helps with the algorithm to get them new viewers. So even if it's not me, if there's somebody whose stuff that you're watching that you're liking, and enjoying, then please subscribe to them, and then like the actual cast, because that makes all the difference. Okay, so this is side 1. This is where we started, and I ended it here with a couple little back stitches. So now I'm going to come in, quick alignment here. I'm going to start back on the seam. This is where I did my stitches before, because I don't want to have this giant knot of forward and backward stitching. I'm going to go down. I am going to take a couple of stitches backwards first. Okay, now I'm going to go forward. Alright, and I'm going to finish this seam. I know it's hard for you to see with my hand there, I'm sorry. Since I'm going fast, I'm trying to be in my regular mode, and that puts my hand in an awkward spot for you. Having it out on the side like this is kind of an awkward spot for me, so we win all the way around. Okay. Just going to align this. So this is that piece. That's side 4. And I didn't have this to sew to before, so now I can sew to it. Okay. And then I will press this. And this was the last piece I put on, and you can see how that all connects. Okay? So hopefully that was helpful. Some people said that the last one wasn't as clear as they'd hoped it would be, so hopefully that was better. I hope you had a good time. I'm a minute over, but thank you all for sticking around, and I will see you the 1st and 3rd Wednesday of February. Yes, the 1st and 3rd Wednesday of February. My son is getting married the Sunday before, so you will probably be hearing some gushing about that when we meet again. Alright, take care, and I'll see you in a couple weeks. Bye-bye.